At the present time, I trust a very fleeting time, police governments rule over a great number of countries. It is the case of the odious 18b, carried to a horrible excess. The family is gathered round the fireside to enjoy the scanty fruits of their toil and to recruit their exhausted strength by the little food that they have been able to gather. There they sit. Suddenly there is a knock at the door, and a heavily armed policeman appears. He is not, of course, one who resembles in any way those functionaries whom we honour and obey in the London streets. It may be that the father or son or friend sitting in the cottage is called out and taken off into the dark, and no one knows whether he will ever come back again, or what his fate has been. There are millions of humble homes in Europe at the moment, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in Austria, in Hungary, in Yugoslavia, in Romania, in Bulgaria, where this fear is the main preoccupation of the family life. President Roosevelt laid down the 4 freedoms, and these are expressed in the Atlantic Charter which we agreed together. Freedom from fear, but this has been interpreted as if it were only freedom of fear of invasion from a foreign country. That is the least of fears to the common man. His patriotism arms him to withstand invasion or to go down fighting. But that is not the fear of the ordinary family in Europe tonight. Their fear is of the policeman's knock. It is not fear for the country, for all men can unite in comradeship for the defense of their native soil. It is for the life and liberty of the individual, for the fundamental rights of man, now menaced and precarious in so many lands that peoples tremble. Surely we can agree in this new Parliament, or the great majority of us, wherever we sit. There are naturally and rightly differences and cleavages of thought, but surely we can agree in this new Parliament, which will either fail the world or once again play a part in saving it, that it is the will of the people freely expressed by secret ballot in universal suffrage elections as to the form of their government and as to the laws which will prevail, which is the first solution and safeguard. Let us then march steadily along that plain and simple line. I avow my faith in democracy, whatever course or view it may take with individuals and parties. They may make their mistakes, and they may profit from their mistakes. Democracy is now on trial as it never was before, and in these islands we must uphold it, as we upheld it in the dark days of 1940 and 1941, with all our hearts, with all our vigilance, with all our enduring and inexhaustible strength. While the war was on, and all the allies were fighting for victory, the word democracy, like many people, had to work overtime. But now that peace has come, we must search for more precise definitions. Elections have been proposed in some of these Balkan countries, where only one set of candidates is allowed to appear, and where, if other parties are to express their opinion, it has to be arranged beforehand that the governing party, armed with its political police and all its propaganda, is the only one which has the slightest chance. Chance, did I say? It is a certainty. Now is the time for Britons to speak out. It is odious to us that governments should seek to maintain their rule otherwise than by free, unfettered elections by the mass of the people. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, says the Constitution of the United States. This must not evaporate in swindles and lies propped up by servitude and murder. In our foreign policy, let us strike continually the notes of freedom and fair play as we understand them in these islands. Then you will find these will be an overwhelming measure of agreement between us, and we shall in this house march forward on an honorable theme, having within it all that invests human life with dignity and happiness. In saying this, I have been trying to gather together and present in a direct form the things which, I believe, are dear to the great majority of us. I rejoiced to read them expressed in golden words by the President of the United States, when he said, "Our victory in Europe was more than a victory of arms. It was a victory of one way of life over another. It was a victory of an ideal founded on the rights of the common man, on the dignity of the human being, and on the conception of the state as the servant, not the master of the people." I think there is not such great disagreement between us. Emphasis may be cast this way or that in particular incidents, but surely this is what the new Parliament on the whole means, that this is what is in our heart and conscience in foreign affairs and world issues we desire. Just as in the baleful glare of 1940, so now when calmer lights shine, let us be united upon those resurgent principles and impulses of the good and generous hearts of men. Thus, to all the material strength we possess and the honored position we have acquired, we shall add these moral forces which glorify mankind, and make even the weakest equals of the strong. I turn now to the domestic sphere. I have already spoken of the enormous easement in their task which the new government have obtained through the swift and sudden ending of the Japanese war. What thousands and millions of pounds sterling are saved from the waste of war! What scores and hundreds of thousands of lives are saved! What vast numbers of ships are set free to carry the soldiers home to all their lands, to carry about the world the food and raw materials vital to industry! What noble opportunities have the new government inherited! Let them be worthy of their fortune, which is also the fortune of us all. To release and liberate the vital springs of British energy and inventiveness, to let the honest earnings of the nation fructify in the pockets of the people, to spread well-being and security against accident and misfortune throughout the whole nation, to plan, wherever state planning is imperative, to guide into fertile and healthy channels the native British genius for comprehension and goodwill. All these are open to them, and all these ought to be open to all of us now. I hope we may go forward together, not only abroad, but also at home, in all matters as far as we possibly can. During the period of the caretaker government, while we all still had to contemplate 18 months of strenuous war with Japan, we reviewed the plans for demobilization in such a way as to make a very great acceleration in the whole process of releasing men and women from the armed forces and from compulsory industrial employment. Now all that is overtaken by the worldwide end of the war, I may say at once that the paragraph of the gracious speech, the King's speech, outlining the new government's policy referring to demobilization and to the plans which were made in the autumn of 1944, with which I am in entire agreement in principle, gives a somewhat chilling impression. Now that we had this wonderful windfall, I am surprised that any government should imagine that language of this kind is still appropriate or equal to the new situation. I see that in the United States the President has said that all the American troops that the American ships can carry home in the next year will be brought home and set free. Are His Majesty's government now able to make any statement of that kind about our armed forces abroad? Or what statement can they make? I do not want to harass them unduly, but perhaps sometime next week some statement could be made. No doubt the Prime Minister will think of that. Great hopes have been raised in the electoral campaign, and from those hopes have sprung their great political victory. Time will show whether those hopes can be well founded, as we deeply trust they may be. But many decisions can be taken now, in the completely altered circumstance in which we find ourselves. The duty of the government is to fix the minimum numbers who must be retained in the next 6 or 12 months period in all the foreign theaters, and to bring the rest home with the utmost speed that our immensely expanding shipping resources will permit. Even more is this releasing process important in the demobilization of the home establishment. I quite agree with the feeling of the Class A men must be ever the dominant factor, but short of that, the most extreme efforts must be made to release people who are standing about doing nothing. I hope the Public Expenditure Committee will at once be reconstituted, and that they will travel about the country examining home establishments and reporting frequently to the House. Now that the war is over, there is no ground of military secrecy which may prevent the publication of the exact numerical ration strengths of our Army, Navy, and Air Force in every theater and at home, and we should have weekly, or at least monthly figures of the progressive demobilization effected. It is an opportunity for the new government to win distinction. At the end of the last war, when I was in charge of the Army and Air Force, I published periodically very precise information. I agree with the words used by the Foreign Secretary when he was Minister of Labor in my administration, namely,